excellent. We have everyone on mute just for the better quality of things, really. And from the start, Mori Oho, Mori Tu, Mori Ora Tato, Humie, Huye, Kaikin. Ko Te Harina Waka Te Iwi, Ko Iwi Goa Nonina, Tena Koto Katu. Welcome, everyone. Today is one of the online sessions managed and arranged by LIANZA TEL committee. I hope you find the topic interesting and relevant. If anyone have any suggestions on the future topic, please get in touch. You can find our details on LIANZA committee webpage. So, textbook, pros and cons. Working in the academic library, I have to say, got mixed feelings towards textbooks. Ever since I got older, 3 copies of latest edition print book overseas a week before the trimester started. And the electronic textbook is even better, more complicated, and given the publisher changing their pricing model and terms and conditions, also better change attitude from academics and our students. So we're having, to my mind, 2 of the best librarians that expert in managing electronic collections. Yes, Joanne. Johan, don't use again. And managing electronic collection come and talk to us about their experience in managing electronic textbooks, and their experience and ideas and concerns. We will have time at the end of this 2 speakers open the floor for questions and comments. But at the meantime, if you like to pop your questions and comments at chat, we'll try to address them as much as possible. And so without further ado, Joanne, would you like to make a start?
Okay, I'm aware that the sound is not particularly good, and I hope that I haven't got the same feedback that we seem to be getting from Victoria. But anyway, I will go.
Perfect, Joanne.
Yeah, okay, I'll go ahead. I was actually somewhat surprised to be asked to do this because at Massey we are not rocking the boat in terms of textbooks. I think we are very fortunate in that the university has had a policy that all students are expected to purchase a copy of their compulsory text. It's not called a compulsory text for any other reason than they are supposed to have it. And we have had a long-standing tradition here that the library provides copies as backup. We currently have a formula with regard to print that for internal students, we will have 1 copy per 100 students that will be put on a closed reserve. And for distance students, because we have the added complication of distance students, that we will have 1 to 50. Supposedly to allow for postage, but also there is the expectation if you are a distance student, you should be purchasing the textbook for yourself. When it gets down to the recommended and highly recommended, it becomes a bit more of a complication. We work on 1 to 20 for internal and 1 to 15 for distance. That can mean multiple copies, but we don't currently have a policy upper limit, but we obviously don't go overboard. We just go by feel. When it comes to eTextbooks, everything that we know has been assigned as a textbook, be it compulsory or recommended, we will go looking for an e-version of it. Last year and even this year, we are getting in the high 70% of the things which are textbooks, and I'm using that as the generic term, are available to us in E without rocking the boat. We have a complication at Massey, and I'm aware that some of the other universities and academic institutions have the same issue regarding Capex and Opex accounting. For those of you that are unfamiliar with this, anything which is Capex is, if you cancel it, you've still got access to it. OPEX, if you buy it and then you cancel it and you lose it, it's OPEX. And anything which is in a subscription model becomes OPEX for textbooks. So therefore, what we are doing is we are preferring, our preferred provider is ProQuest EBL, eBook Central. In most cases, it's a 3-user model, and we will buy the 3-user and straight away turn off downloading. We are providing access to it if you don't happen to have your textbook with you. If you choose not to buy the textbook, then you have to take your chances along with everybody else. That model has actually worked extremely well for us. We actually only have one title that we have bought multiple 3-user licenses for, and in that case we have bought 3, so we have got 9, and we have a handful of titles where we have gone for 2. This model actually fits in really well with our whole ebook model. At the present point in time, unless we know something is a textbook or on a reading list, in most cases we will buy a 1-user license. As soon as we get a turnaway, we will up that, and usually then to either 3 or non-linear, depending which is the most economic. When we first started going for 1-user, we turned it all off and said 1-user and it can't be downloaded, but we very quickly, within a matter of 3 or 4 weeks, decided that wasn't necessary. And the interesting thing is that the number of times we've actually had to upgrade from 1-user to multiple is, once again, a handful of times. It might be 20 titles a year. So we are working with the EBL model. We prefer EBL because you have that ability to modify the access based on individual titles rather than it being a generic one-time fits all. We understand that EBSCO are going to be introducing that, but it has been coming for a long time and I'm not aware that it's actually there yet. Obviously, we would prefer academics to set textbooks on platforms or with publishers that don't have restrictions with DRM. Obviously, Springer is one that springs to mind. Sorry about the pun. Elsevier is another one where unlimited users, no DRM. And if our academics do actually approach us, we will actually say to them, well, you know, these are options. What we have found this year, however, is that a lot of the academics, and I think there's probably been a big push on campus by Cengage, are actually setting Cengage titles with the additional MindTap resources. Now that means that the library cannot obviously offer the MindTap resources, and we can offer the Cengage textbook, in most cases print, occasionally electronically. That decision by academics to go for the MindTap resources as being additional means that the students are being obligated to buy their own individual copies if they choose to use, if they choose to buy the textbook, which we hope they will. In terms of other options, World Scientific are offering an evidence-based textbook model. A lot of the other publishers don't do this, but World Scientific is one where anything they have designated as a textbook is put in a separate collection, and we have had that going for quite some time. Unfortunately, World Scientific is not a publisher that many of our academics choose to publish with, but we are at least providing the option. So for the other 20–25% that we cannot offer electronically, yes, they are available on VitalSource and other platforms in some cases. If the academics want to make the VitalSource option, it's something that they have to deal with. We are not offering it centrally because it straight away becomes OPEX funding and we are not resourced for that. If the academics choose, they do have the option of actually getting funding from students to do those things. And in most cases with the VitalSource, they are doing the negotiating and then the students are still expected to purchase for their own purposes. One of the areas that we have run into issues with VitalSource and how it's being used is that there have been issues with students stuck in China as a result of lockdown last year and this year. that they are not always readily available to them. But in the main, we are doing a very simple thing with textbooks, and it is working for us. So that's my contribution.
Thank you. We're just gonna.
Is that any better with the headsets?
It probably is a little bit better. It's not as echoey.
Okay, oh, that's good. We'll just try this for now. Thanks, Joanne. It's a lot to take on. I'm busy writing notes. Try to see if I catch everything.
I'm quite happy to take questions at any point.
Yeah, so we have a few minutes, and if any questions, comments, or anything from the floor, feel free to use the chat or unmute yourself at this point.
Somebody's asked a question about VitalSource. Probably Aisha and Victoria are a better place to talk about that because they are actually using it. For us, it's become a, don't touch. We don't have a cost limit with textbooks. Basically, we look at it from the point of view that a 3-user model for $1,000, it's $350 US a textbook, which is not extraordinary, out of the way exorbitant. We don't have to hold it on the shelf. We don't have to post it out. It doesn't fall to pieces and it can't get stolen. So it's an advantage. You balk at the 1,000, but actually in economics, the 1,000 is not out of the way. Helen, your model 3-user or 1-user preferred. For textbooks, we will go for 3-user automatically. We will go for 1-user for ordinary ebooks. And no, we haven't looked at any other platforms because we are only interested in a purchase to own model. Just looking what else. Abby, yeah, the 3-user licenses with 0% downloads, well, sorry, it's read online for 3 users at a time. If it's the textbook, the students are expected to purchase. And we are not making any additional decisions around whether this is printable or not. If it's able to be downloaded, if it's not able to be downloaded, it's purely a read online model. So that's not affecting our decision making. And we are aware, I looked at something yesterday which was recommended that there had been thousands of pages printed, and I thought, well, yeah. And an example, we do not, the only PDA model we do at Massey is we have got the JSTOR PDA or DDA. We have not down that model at all. Mainly operate the whole funding thing again. While when you purchase the title on DDA, PDA, it becomes a Capex. How do you pay for the bit in between, which is the non-purchase bit? So no, we haven't gone down that model. Is there any other questions I've missed?
Joanne, do you find it difficult for the students to use the various different platforms for ebooks that you have? I know you've got ProQuest, but you must have some EBSCO ebooks.
We have EBSCO ebooks and ProQuest, but as I said, ProQuest is our preferred model. Obviously, publisher platform first up is our preferred model, full stop. But after that, we are definitely ProQuest. And looking at the turnaways that we get, no, I don't think the students are having any issues.
Okay, so how much training do you give them to, or
Well, we don't.
Is it?
We don't. There is a help page on our website of how to use them, but that's it.
Okay.
And I know that we have a couple of the INRS staff from Massey on this call. If any of them want to chip in, please feel free.
My other statement is we have EBSCO ebooks over ProQuest only because we had them first. But I did yesterday actually get EBSCO to turn off the download feature. You have to request them to do it.
Is that title by title or overall?
Overall, yeah.
Yeah, no, well, that's the problem with EBSCO, that it's a one size fits all. You've either got it on or off. With eBook Central, you can turn it off at a title level. Okay. You can change your loan period at a title level. It's not a one shop fits all. Does your workflow for signing on work with your eReserve team? At the present point in time, the library has no direct involvement with eReserve, which is what Massey's using, and we don't look at providing electronic versus print. We will go for a print copy if there is a print copy available, and we will also, the electronic is a bonus. At the present point in time, although we've got formula for print, we don't have a formula for electronic, but mentally I have it in my mind that one user equals 100 students, and there is no need to distinguish between internal and distance because they have the same access chances. Excuse me. So no, we don't look at not buying because of it being able to provide 10% on the learning modules.
Trying to see if any questions you have about Joanne's case and publishers, we can either pop into the chat, or we'll have time at the end of the session. We'll open up the floor again. So next one is Aisha. She's from my Victoria University of Wellington. Sit next to me. I'll pass the microphone to her. Do I sound a bit better than before?
Very much better.
Okay, brilliant. I'll pass this on.
Kia ora koutou, no mai haere mai, ko Ngāti Ingarani te iwi, ko te whanganui atara te hau kainga, ko Aisha toko ingoa. Kia ora everyone, my name is Aisha. I'm the Collection Policy and Development Librarian at Victoria University of Wellington, te Hetinga Waka. So I am one of a small but perfectly formed two-person team called Collection Policy and Development, and we sit very closely between subject librarians and our acquisition staff, and basically our job is to do a lot of the work around policy and guidelines for the collection, and also to evaluate new content, work closely with publishers, do a lot of the persuading and influencing around you know, the resources that we look at for purchase, and also we do a lot of the evaluation work. So we manage subscription reviews around, you know, what stays in the collection and what comes out, print collection evaluation. Yeah, there's probably lots of things I've missed. We design and deliver our annual ebook strategy. And we're sort of quite heavily involved with, yeah, all of those aspects of the collection. So that's the background there. Thanks to Joanne for taking the plunge and going first. We actually had a chat yesterday before this Zoom, and it was really nice. It's nice actually to see that the similarities, I guess, in some of the workflows, and you feel slightly less guilty about ignoring some of those turnaways. No, somebody else is doing the same thing, and you know, because you have to have a line, I suppose, around the level of access that you're going to provide to these, let's say, more challenging types of resources. Yeah, I was sort of thinking about how this e-textbook issue has evolved for us over the last few years. And I think it really started back in 2016, which seems like a long time ago now, but it feels like it's been sort of a slow burn to a really significant escalation. I think back in 2016 was when ProQuest first started to work with Cengage and brought out their library copy 3-user textbook model. And also 2016 was the year that we started using Talus Aspire to manage our course reading lists. And so suddenly there was a workflow there that really supported the use of e-resources, I guess, in course reserves. And there was also these library copies of eTextbooks becoming available. And I think we probably buried our heads in the sand for a little while, I guess I would say, and bought things on request. We certainly didn't scramble to suddenly convert everything to E. And it's taken a long time for things to become more available in E. I think that's been a gradual process. I think lots of publishers initially were very wary, and with good reasons, because I think it certainly it has affected their revenue stream of, you know, print sales to students. But yeah, things have become more available over time. And I think publishers have realized that there is another revenue stream there from libraries and academic institutions to provide, you know, that there's in some cases a responsibility to provide access or a mandate. And so there's some dollars to be had, I guess. I mean, Joanne has already mentioned, so at Massey, there's obviously no mandate, and the university is very clear that students should be buying their own set text. And that's certainly the case at Victoria as well. I don't know whether there's an actual openly available policy, but that is the expectation. But then also underneath that, there's this second layer where I think some academics potentially feel that that's not necessarily fair, or that it's a burden on students. And so we do get a lot of people saying, you know, I know the students are supposed to, but reality is they're not. And, you know, we want to make sure that they're engaging. And also there's this kind of like tiered aspect to course reading. So there's, you know, obviously there's the set text, and then as Joanne mentioned, there's the recommended text, and there's the supplementary readings. And so, you know, we're trying to provide access to all of those things for the purposes of equity, and because, you know, that's our job as the university library. But it's a challenge sometimes, because some of those things aren't available in E, and sometimes the ability for the library to provide them is very restricted. And so, yeah, it's a challenge. So where we come from as a library is we aim to provide sort of at least one copy of set texts. Joanne mentioned formula. We used to have a formula for print texts, and we don't have a formula for e-texts, and we no longer have a formula for print texts. We're kind of very responsive, I suppose, and play it by ear. Part of the reason for that is that we don't always have the information available to us around what is a set text and what isn't until after the fact, and certainly not how many students necessarily are on that course. We can get that information from Talus, but it's not provided to us in advance of, you know, a trimester. And so often we only find out that something is being used when we start getting tons of turnaways, or, you know, when an academic gets in touch with a subject librarian and says, hey, I've assigned this reading, why can't my students access it? In which case we're sort of fighting fire with small buckets of water. I don't know. Yeah, and I think that's probably been our experience, is that, you know, academics will link to, I mean, in terms of opportunities, eTextbooks, fantastic, you know, that you can provide online access to a wide variety of students. It's a huge boon for obviously distance learning, And, you know, you can't imagine what the COVID situation would have been like without, you know, people having access to those kinds of e-materials. But it's also a bit of a double-edged sword. I think there is a gap in understanding, certainly among students and academic staff, around how accessible materials are, and an expectation that everything is equally accessible, and that's, you know, as we know, unfortunately not the case. And sort of books have suffered in a way by coming after journals, you know, because we do have fantastic access to journal content, and it is openly available when you can download it, a journal article, and take it away with you, and 500 class students can do the same thing. But as we know, it's not the case always with ebooks, and so they suffer by comparison, I think. And I think also academics don't necessarily always understand the financial and logistical barriers that the library has to providing e-textbooks or course reserves. And I think historically, and even to an extent now, libraries are kind of quite reluctant to talk about money and how much they pay for things, or and so often academics have no understanding that, you know, we're paying over $1,000 for 1 3-user copy, and they don't really understand why we can't just provide a course set, or that, you know, that our budgets don't allow for that. So those are some of the challenges, I think, in terms of the environment that we're working in. In terms of workflows, we have a lot of similarities, I guess, with you know, the workflows that Joanne's described. We work quite closely with ProQuest. We have a lot of the ProQuest 3-user textbooks, because a lot of that content is assigned for courses here. And it does a pretty great job. I think there was a question in the chat about some of the changes to DRM that we've seen, certainly with Cengage, and now with Wiley, and I can't remember who the third one was, but, you know, the publishers who have pulled back their DRM because they're concerned that students are downloading chapters and sharing them amongst each other, and they're certainly seeing a drop in revenue from those individual sales to students. And we were really concerned about that. We had a meeting with ProQuest last year to, you know, before the Cengage thing happened, and they were interested to know what we thought would happen. And I think at the time, you know, as with now, our attitude was like, well, we will always try and provide access to the text in whatever form it comes in, but we certainly wouldn't be buying more copies of a text just because you make it more restrictive. And honestly, it's not, you know, we can't imagine that it's going to do much to change, you know, the decline in print sales to students. And so, yeah, I think, yeah, there are some challenges there. But I think students, the landscape has shifted for students, and they've adapted really, really quickly. You know, I think we're a bit slower as organizations, but certainly students are very quick. As soon as they realize that a text is available through the library or online, and as soon as they realize, you know, that there are some restrictions to that text, and they might not be able to get in there one day, but they'll be able to get in there later on that afternoon. And that in some cases they could take a chapter, and in other cases they can't. They might just have to read online. They kind of just adapt, and they're okay with that. And they, you know, anything's better than paying $150 for, you know, the textbook for 4 or 5 courses that you might be on. And so I think they're pretty flexible, and there's probably quite a lot for us to learn there in terms of flexibility. And it's interesting to watch, actually, the student behavior, I think, and there's certainly something that we can learn there about being flexible, for sure. One of the So yeah, in terms of similarities with what Joanne was talking about, we certainly, yeah, we buy the ProQuest books, we buy the EBSCO books, and we turn off the downloads where we can see that things are being used pretty heavily. I don't know whether you do this, Joanne, but there's a mediated option where the student will, so once they can't get in anymore, if the textbook is not for sale anymore, they'll get a message that says, you know, there's no access to this, come back in 5 minutes. But if it's still available, it pops up with a message that says you can recommend this to your librarian. And so we get these messages that say, hi, I can't get into this textbook. It's quite interesting. And you're able to reply to them. And so what we did is kind of formulate this generic message, and we just use it all the time. So basically, even though we don't have a formula, we usually cap it to, we use automatic upgrade functionality, which is really useful as a workflow because it means that you don't have to intervene. So we start with a default one user or whatever the lowest user of a book is, and then we allow it to auto upgrade up to a maximum of 2 copies of, or unlimited, depending on what the highest user model is. And there's also a price cap there, so so that those really expensive textbooks can't go through unmediated, and then it automatically caps at 2, 3 user or unlimited, depending on what's available. And then we get these mediated requests, and we kind of already know that we're going to say no to them in most cases, but it allows us to have, I guess, a channel of communication with students, and we send them this generic message all the time that just says, hey, thanks, you know, we have X amount of copies of this book, which means that only X amount of people can use it at the same time. Please check back shortly, you know, another copy will become available. Please, you know, once you get into the textbook, take the chapter that you require, and then exit the platform so that someone else can use the book. And that's our like little ebook spiel. And I think it's quite successful, and that's a message that the subject librarians have also been fantastic at taking out to course coordinators and academics and responding in individual queries to students with, and I think we've really had some traction, I guess, and we will continue to do that to kind of spread that message of, hey, it's not always available immediately, but if you do these things, then you should be able to get access, and I think that's pretty helpful. Oh, there's quite a lot of questions in the chat. Thanks, people. I don't know whether to answer them now or yeah. Maybe I'll get back to them at the end. So in terms of things that are different, so Joanne talked about Capex and Opex. We are pretty lucky, really. We had some quite forward-thinking staff a few years ago, including someone that's sitting next to me, who realized that we were direly underfunded as far as Opex went, and that in terms of the nature of the resources that we were beginning to acquire, so things like data sets for our commerce faculty, that you just couldn't buy outright. They're not for sale outright. Initially, a lot of streaming media content, and obviously now things like textbooks, sometimes reference material where it's continuously updated. We could see that basically there was quite a lot of more subscription content coming onto the market, and we just didn't have the Opex budget for it. And so some of our wonderful staff made a case to the University Finance to swap some of our budget, basically. So in a gradual process, it was over a couple of years, right? Over about 3 years. So we gradually exchanged. So we took a reduction in the Capex to get an increase in the Opex to give us, you know, more subscription money to be responsive with, and that has been really successful. So it has given us the opportunity to experiment with some subscription models, and has been fantastic in terms of textbooks, because subscription does seem to be a model that the publishers are interested in using for this content, I guess, because it's, you know, continually updating, and also it's like a regular income stream. And so we have had some flexibility there with that, and it's allowed us to do a couple of different things. We did a pilot with Cortexed. Some of you might be aware of Cortexed, which is an integrated learning module platform. So basically it has the textbook or textbooks, they're ascribed to a specific number of students in a specific course, and then it has this kind of fancy engagement software in the back end where you can look at how many students have picked up the textbook over the course of the course, and how many pages they looked at after each lecture, how much of the readings they actually did, all that kind of thing. And so my manager, Margaret Ferguson, did a fantastic job working with Cortexed and set up a pilot for 3 courses. And we prioritized courses where there was a real, you know, week-to-week integration with the text, and where it was a required text, and where there was a small number of students, so under 30, I think it was, to keep it financially viable. I think we did 1 info course and 1 health course. I can't remember the third one. We tried to get some funding from the university to run the pilot, and we were not successful in doing that. So one publisher, Walters Kluwer, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, funded one of the texts for us as a kind of experiment, and then we funded the rest. And it was, you know, it was very affordable because it was a very small number of students. And what we discovered from that experiment was that I think we're not quite there yet with that model, and may not be for some time. I think what we found, well, there were some challenges. So we couldn't get it integrated with Blackboard here. So our IT department was super reluctant to allow the plugin because there was an exchange of individual information there. And so it had to sit outside of Blackboard, which provided some challenges, I think, for the students. And we didn't really, I mean, it was relatively affordable, but it obviously, that model does 100% transfer the cost of texts to the library unless you're getting some wider funding. And I think, you know, it was pretty clear that the university wasn't ready to engage with that model at that time. And also, I don't think, there were some challenges with the platform. Students didn't love it. They didn't seem to be interested in using much of the enhanced functionality, and also, it didn't seem like it was super helpful in terms of engagement. So that was interesting. It was an interesting model, and an interesting experiment. And then the other things that we've done, so we have titles on VitalSource. Some people have asked about VitalSource. We started with the old Bridge, and now we've moved to the newer platform, Explore. The difference between the two, interesting. I don't know, they promised a lot of stuff and haven't quite delivered yet, but basically you can only Explore titles are only by subscription, and we've kind of seen VitalSource as a bit of a last resort. So our attitude has always been like, it's most important to just get the access wherever you can. And so, but it's so manual. It's such a manual workflow. It's such a single title workflow. And, you know, we've worked really hard on our broader collection development strategies to not do that anymore. And so it really rankles to have to do these like individual title subscriptions. And you can't even negotiate it with VitalSource. You have to go to the publisher, do the negotiation, and then they make it available in VitalSource, and then you have to manage the subscription term yourself and figure out when it's going to be expiring, and you might have 13 different titles all expiring at different times, and then you have to go back to the publisher and renegotiate the terms, and the back end of Vital Source is not ideal and the front end is probably it's a bit like one of those pantomime donkeys where there's two ends and neither of them are particularly attractive. But it serves a purpose. And someone's asking about perusal. No, we haven't looked at perusal. I'm aware about it. What else have we done? Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Joanne. We have we've got some Cambridge titles. Oh, I think we've only got one, haven't we? On the Cambridge Higher Ed platform, which in terms of restrictions is quite restrictive. I think no print copy download. Yeah, no, we haven't yet looked at alternatives to Cortexed. We're doing an EBA with Elsevier, an eTextbook EBA, and that was something that became available via call as a call pilot, and that's still running at the moment, and I think it'll be interesting to see what the uptake around that was. It was relatively affordable, I think, a subscription for the amount of content that we got for it. We also have something called ClinicalKey for nursing and health, and that's been a real success, actually, I think, because the health faculty were really keen on it, and we've got a fantastic subject librarian for health, and she did a lot of work really canvassing with academics, talking to them about the fact that it was, not a cheap product, and that, if they wanted it, then they were going to have to actually really make use of that content and use a lot of those titles as set text. And so the expectation was set before we got access to ClinicalKey, which has been really good, and the uptake and the usage has been fantastic. And it is really nice to be able to, provide access to those key resources for those students, and like a number of courses.
Yes, it's a ClinicalKey student.
Yeah, so we have ClinicalKey student.
Its access is it's a bit issue, but we made it work with it.
Yeah, so I was just saying to me the access was a bit of an issue, but we've made it work with Open Athens. Yeah, I'm just aware of the time. I'm just like rabbiting nervously on about anything. So basically, I mean, I think our strategy has been to experiment. I don't know, we're always up for a bit of experimentation where we can do that. I think as librarians, maybe maybe we forget that that we do have quite a lot of influence, and sometimes when you get on board early in the piece, you can kind of influence what happens with products, and that's quite good. You can give your feedback, you can complain about things that you don't like, and hopefully you can change that if you moan enough. I think it's also important that we can like sort of put our foot down about certain things. There are some models, I think maybe Oxford, was it Oxford? They've got a title where it's like 24-hour access, no print copy download, vastly expensive. We can say no to those things. It's outrageous. And also, I think it's sort of like keeping an eye on what's happening internationally as well. We were on a call the other day talking to a publisher who's based in Australia, asking them about the landscape over there, and they were saying that that there's the need for engagement, because there are mandates in Australia around, you know, equity of access to content materials. So there's a driver there for them to engage even more than us. And we have things like Cool, which is great. So that means that, you know, we can piggyback off some of those things that are happening over there. I think one example probably is the LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters textbooks. You know, Australian libraries really pushed for those to come onto the ProQuest platform, and they were successful. And off the back of that, we then got New Zealand LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters textbooks, and that was fantastic. That's been really good. Yeah, I think also, you know, there's a role for the library to play in advocating, yeah, for better models. And with our user communities, I mentioned that earlier, I guess, that that we need to keep sharing that message that, you know, all e-content is not created equal, you know, and and that, you know, there are challenges and we're doing our best, and here's how you can get around these things. I mean, not get around things in an illegal way, but, you know, here's how you can make this content, you know, work for you, and, you know, try and figure out how accessible something is before you put it in a reading list, please. You know, talk to the library, we're your friends, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I don't know. Do we want to do some of the questions?
Yeah.
I'm quite happy to contribute on. No, we don't weed out ebook collection particularly. We do remove the access from the catalogue, but it is actually incredibly difficult to get ebooks off platforms. Once you've bought it on a platform, to get it off that platform is actually quite difficult. So we don't tend to weed, but we do remove the access from the catalogue, like it's not accessible on the catalogue. The other thing I'd just comment is that when we do have an ebook, we actually do put a note in to say what the access is. So we'll put note, this is restricted to one user, or note, this is restricted to 3 simultaneous users. So students are aware at the time that if they get turned away, that potentially that's the reason. It's been quite interesting though. The use of, we thought 3 simultaneous users was quite explanatory. The understanding is actually very different, including from academics. So they look at it as being only 3 people can use it, full stop, even though we're saying 3 simultaneous users. So that's just another comment. And there was one other that I was just going to make a comment on. And I want to thank Kirsten for giving you the information about how we get our textbook information. Also, we tend to buy from aggregators like Gobi for title by title purchasing. When it comes to upgrades, right from 1 user to 3 user, we're doing it directly on ProQuest. EBSCO have more restrictions about what you can upgrade and how you can upgrade, which is an ongoing issue. I think the other caveat I just put in is that the bulk of our ebooks now, we are using evidence-based. We've got evidence-based with most of our major publishers now, and that is very positively our preferred model, and it is one which is working very well for us.
I concur with that, Joanne, and I think that's actually a model I'd quite like to see for textbooks, ideally more. You know, we have this Elsevier EBA for textbooks, so it would be great. And I mentioned this on a call to a publisher this week, actually, that, you know, there is a reason why the EBA model has been taken up so heavily across Australia and New Zealand, is because it's great. It's not a title by title workflow. You know, you do your evaluation at the end, and you let it run, and it's got cap cost, and it provides access to a lot of content. It's a really good model, and I think it's one that they should certainly consider more, and hopefully more publishers will. Do you buy direct from publishers or platforms? So we have Rialto, ProQuest Rialto, and so we buy direct within the marketplace there. We still use Gobi for bits and pieces as well. Does Victoria do PDA? Yes, we do PDA. We've got a vastly mixed methods approach to everything. So we have an annual ebook strategy that we've had since about 2015, and I think in the last 2 years it's kind of started mentioning textbooks more and more. But we have a base level of subscription content, so stuff like Academic Complete, where you very cheaply provide access to a huge number of resources. Then we have our EBA and DDA programs. So we do DDA with JSTOR, and we do an EBA for their backlist as well. And who else do we do PDA with? Yeah. And we do some ProQuest DDA and EBSCO. And then we purchase some front files. So we purchase a Springer front file every year and a few other ones, Edward Elgar. We do a lot of EBAs, Cambridge, Bloomsbury. Again, as Joanne said, it's our preferred model. And then we have this, take it where you can get it approach to textbooks at the moment.
Yeah, obviously the use of open source would be ideal, but or open access, one of the problems in there is that academics are not interested in doing open access type textbooks because they don't get any credit for it against their research outputs. And that's one of the issues that needs to be borne in mind with open access books. Yes, we would love it, but actually getting them is actually quite difficult. And the list of textbooks from the Student Registry SMS system, we are very fortunate. The university has a contract with Campus Books, formerly Bennett's, as the university book supplier, and as part of that contract, they have to provide to the library the list of textbooks. So they actually take it out of the SMS system. They do their magic on it. So when we get the spreadsheet, we actually know what edition or what version of a textbook the bookshop is going to be making available to students. And we also know how much they're going to be charging. And the nice thing is we are under no obligation to actually buy from the bookshop. In fact, we very, very rarely do, but at least we have the complete information. So we're very fortunate in that.
Yeah, I think in terms of OERs, obviously there's been that's a very hot topic at the moment. Some of our staff have just created an OER LibGuide, and certainly the subject librarians are aware, and keeping an eye on OERs as an evolving situation. I was talking to a subject librarian the other day who said they were aware of more than one academic using an open textbook. I'm not so sure about people creating them yet. I don't think we're quite there yet. There's not that much support from the university, that, as far as I'm aware, around putting time and effort into that. And yes, Joanne is very lucky to have that information from the bookshop. And that's certainly something that we would like to have, and we'll try harder to get, I think.
I think the biggest issue we're having at the moment is academics putting a reading from a particular book for a particular week. So in week 6, students have to read this particular chapter without telling the library. And then all of a sudden we get a massive number of turnaways on something that we were not able to be proactive about. So we are being very proactive as soon as there's turnaways. And I've actually now learnt to recognise the turnaway messages as to whether it's something which we've already turned off downloads for, or whether it's something that we've only bought a 1 user license for. So we are as proactive as we can be in terms of making sure if we know, or if there is obviously an issue, we will deal with it. But if it's a textbook and we're getting turnaways, I'm sorry, I have no sympathy. They're tough.
Thanks, everyone. Oh, there's another question come about Leganto. So the last one, okay. I'm very aware of the time. It's been a great session, more registered than I can you imagine when I start the topic with the LIANZA committee, and very thankful for Joanne and Aisha's sharing their experience and all the questions that come in the chat. I think we might miss one or two, but we'll go back to the chat after this webinar and try to respond to some of the questions that we couldn't at this time. So just to have another look, I'll see if anything else we missed. Aisha and Joanne, do you have anything to add at this point before we I think from my perspective, looking after the library collection budget and all, sometimes I feel like I'm stuck in the between the rock and hard place, where on one side we want to provide the content to academic and student, but other side have very limited budget, either Capex or Opex. But as Aisha said, do realize where we in the middle between publisher and users, but we also have influence both ways. So hopefully we can learn a thing or two from our students and try to influence the publisher to come up with more affordable and more feasible options for every party on the go. With that being said, we are a couple of minutes ahead of time. Just see if any questions. 13 messages. So topic suggestions, yes, we'll try to see if we can schedule open education resources topic later the year. And that being said, thanks everyone. We'll just close the meeting, and as I was saying, the record will be made available shortly after, and we'll post some questions.
I just want to say that we're quite happy to answer any questions that you might have afterwards.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So get in touch if you have anything that hasn't been added to the chat, and we'll definitely happy to answer any questions. I'm speaking on behalf of Aisha. Just send the question over and we'll address them. Okay, I'll just do a closing. Whakanoa I tēnei wahi, whakanoa I tēnei kōrero, whakanoa I tēnei tangata, hōmei hoi e, taiki. Kia ora, thank you.